We're doing the American Revolution. We're going to start out with the causes. The first cause was disagreements between the colonies and Great Britain, and the colonies thought that they should have all the rights that Englishmen had, and Great Britain didn't feel like that. They felt that colonies should be used to benefit only the crown and parliament. The next thing is like the distance or the geography between the colonies and Great Britain, and the colonies were far away from Great Britain, and that created for them a sense of independence from Great Britain. And for Great Britain, it was hard for them to overcome that independence because of the distance. The next thing is colonial rights, or what the colonies felt they had a right to do because they already did it, and that was impose taxes, gather troops, and pass laws. And the colonists saw these as rights, but Great Britain didn't think so, and they restricted these rights, which caused conflict between Great Britain and the colonies. The last thing is the Enlightenment, which we've already learned about, and the people in the colonies read works from Locke and Rousseau, and from this they learned about limited government, separation of powers, and the consent of the government, which they wanted. They realized they didn't have, and they wanted this, so they wanted to fight for this.
Hello, we're going to be talking about the major people of the American Revolution. George Washington, an army official for the American Revolution, he helped win the war and he was our first president. Benedict Arnold, he was an American general for the American Revolution. He deserted the American side for the British side. He was a traitor. William Prescott, an American colonel, his troops inflicted a significant amount of casualties at Bunker Hill. Paul Revere, he was an American activist and artisan, and he is known for the great saying, "The British are coming."
Okay, now the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the main events of the American Revolution. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is the Stamp Act of 1765, which was passed by the British Parliament, and it was the first direct tax on the colonies. Okay, next thing is the Boston Massacre, which occurred on March 5th, 1770, and 100 hostile colonists opened fire on a crowd, and it killed 5 people and wounded 6 people, and there were some British officers, and that's kind of what started all. Okay, so next thing is the famous Boston Tea Party, which occurred on December 16th, 1773, and 70 colonists boarded British trade ships dressed as Indians and dumped tea into the harbor. Okay, so next up is the Intolerable Acts of 1774, and the British closed the Boston harbor for all shipping until the colonists paid for the tea that they dumped. And then the Intolerable Acts also limited political authority of the colonists and made legal persecution of British officials more difficult, and also extended the boundaries of the Quebec province. Alright, next up is the First Continental Congress, and they came to a meeting on September 5th, 1774, and delegates from 12 colonies met to discuss how the colonists would react to the Intolerable Acts, which they ended up boycotting British goods and banned exports to Britain. Okay, next up is Lexington and Concord, and this happened on the days of April 18th and 19th in 1775, and the British set out to destroy colonist weaponry in Concord, and so a bunch of militiamen gathered in Lexington, and then the British ended up going to Concord, and they destroyed some of the supplies, but they were eventually defeated at the North Bridge. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776, and it proclaimed the 13 colonies free from Great Britain. Okay, now the battles of Saratoga occurred on September 19th and October 7th in 1777, and these battles were the turning point of the war, and it also gained French support for the economy. Okay, so next up was the surrender of Yorktown, and that happened on October 19th, 1781, and Lord Cornwallis accepted the terms of surrender which he had asked for 2 days earlier. Alright, and finally for the main events is the Treaty of Paris, which happened on September 3rd, 1783, and the war was finally over and new boundaries were set, and the Mississippi River in the west, the Great Lakes in the north, and the 31st parallel in the south.
What up, y'all? Now we're doing the results of the American Revolution. Alright, the political results of the American Revolution were a new nation was born. There were 13 colonies. It was a democracy. They were led by themselves, and the Treaty of Paris ended the war. Okay, next is the economic results of the American Revolution. Because of the war, Britain decided to cut trade off with America, so that meant that America went into debt and a lot of businesses shut down. Prices rose and really heavy taxes followed shortly after. It actually took nearly 20 years after the war to regain the economic strength that they had.
Now announcing conclusion of the American Revolution and things.
Okay, this is a conclusion of the American Revolution. The American Revolution basically took place because the Great Britain leaders tightened imperial rules or reigns on the colonists that can be traced back to 1763. And also the land policy and British troops irritated the colonists because they wanted freedom to do what they wanted. But the most serious problem was the money. The colonists did not have enough money that they wanted. Okay, there's a few things you probably didn't know about the American Revolution. The Americans in 1776 had the lowest tax rate in the Western world. And there were also two tea parties. The one that, of course, you all know about, and then the one with the improper Bostonians was repeated in March 7th, 1774. And Ben Franklin actually wrote the first Declaration of Independence. And also, on the first submarine attack happened during the war. It was in New York Harbor in 1776. Okay, and also there were very many women in the army that saw combat. The last thing you did not know about the American Revolution was that more Americans fought with the British than fought with Washington. The British had 65,000 to 8,000 soldiers, where Washington only had 3,468 soldiers.
That was the American Revolution.